Hey, folks, welcome to another episode of Draft Talk on Pittsburgh Sports Live. I'm Alan Saunders, joined as always by Nick Farabaugh of SteelersNow.com. Nick and I are talking every weekday in the month of April leading up to the 2021 NFL Draft, and we're now 1 month away here on Thursday, or 1 week away, 1 month. Yeah, let's not do this for another month. I'm ready to get there. But a week from tonight, we'll be discussing who the Steelers picked in the first round, along with Mike Osti and Kel Berger here on the channel as we do our annual draft show live on the night of the first round, and I believe the second day as well. But today we're going to talk about defensive tackles. We've been kind of going position by position, and we're talking about traditional defensive tackles, which means for the Steelers, that means some guys that can play nose, some guys that can play end, some guys that could play both. And it's not a position of big need for the Steelers, and it's also not a very deep class at this spot. So I don't think we're talking about guys that are going to be options on those first 2 days for the Steelers, but there are some players that I think could be interesting fits for them, and I do think they have a chance to upgrade some of the depth they have on their team. Nick, first of all, let's talk about this defensive tackle class, because what gives? This is usually a premium position where you see multiple guys go with the first 10 to 15 picks, and we might not have a first rounder.
It's not a good class at all. Daniel Jeremiah, I believe yesterday, said that this is the worst defensive tackle class he studied since starting scouting in 2003. It's certainly the worst I've studied. There is no top-end prospect in this class. Really, it's Barmore on Wuzurike, and then it's kind of just a bunch of guys. Like, there's a few guys down the list that we'll probably end up talking about, like a Tufele, Tui Pelotu, Nixon, McNeil, Brown, Togiai, someone like that. But this is not a very good class. A lot of those guys that I just mentioned are probably rotational guys with maybe some upside. And Barmore is a boomer bust. The guy who is the top prospect is a boomer bust. Could very much bust out of the league because he is a 1-year starter. Yes, it's at Alabama, but he's such a heavy boomer bust guy. It's just not a good class. Down to day 3, there's a lot of fringe roster guys that are just going to be fighting to make the roster. It's not, so we've had much better defensive tackle classes, and I think it's a very good thing because we would have been talking about this as a need had Tyson Alualu not reversed course. So that was huge for them to get him back. I think it's part of the reason why Alualu got $3 million from Jacksonville when he accepted that contract, because it wasn't even a particularly great defensive line free agent class. And a lot of defensive linemen got overpaid this offseason because it's such a weak defensive tackle class.
Yeah, that is such a unique position that the Steelers have. There aren't that many 3-4 teams in the league. And, now it seems that even if you are a 3-4 team, you're going to spend maybe 40% of the time in the nickel, at least. The Steelers spent a plurality of their time in the nickel last season. It was their most commonly used defense. So that means only 2 defensive linemen on the field for the Steelers. They use 2 D linemen and 2 linebackers in their nickel. So I guess, I think Alualu coming back was a big deal for them because they can sort of cross off defensive line in general in this draft. They don't feel like they have a need there. But in general, like, is this a position that the Steelers is just going to be less and less important for going forward?
The true nose is probably going to be less and less important because, again, it's just the Steelers they kind of had a little reversion back to the mean last year in terms of moving back to base. I think they played about 30% of the time last year, which was higher than they played since like 2016. But they really only did that because their secondary was a hodgepodge of changing guys at the corner position. Because Hilton was banged up, Nelson was banged up, Hayden had stints with COVID, and they really only went out of that. And also the linebacker position, whatever the heck was going on there as well. They didn't really have a trusty dimebacker. By dimebacker, I don't mean Sutton, obviously. I mean a linebacker that can cover in dime. They didn't really have a trusty guy there, so they stayed in base a lot more last year as a result of that.
They also have 2 games against Baltimore, which is essentially turned into an option team, and they're going to stay in base a lot of the time in that as well.
Yeah, exactly. So, base, that's why it became a little bit more prevalent last year. I think we see it come down again this year. And Alualu has obviously the thing with the Steelers nose position is it's not just nose. Their nose tackle can shift out to 3 tech and in the 4-3 looks that they use in their sub packages. He could shift out to 5. Alu can play all those spots, obviously. Javon Hargrave could play all those spots as well. So the Steelers don't when the Steelers draft, and I think Carlos Davis can as well do that. So when the Steelers draft a nose, they're not drafting him just to be a nose. They're drafting him to be a sub package 3 tech or a rotational 5.
Yeah, I mean, Lulu is just he's just a D end, and they just move him in there. So do they need a 325-pound plus guy to be in the middle of that defense, or do you feel like what they've done these last couple of years by Hargrave was honestly a little bit undersized for what they've traditionally done at that position, and now Lulu's way undersized for what they've done at that position. Do you feel like that they don't need that big body anymore?
I don't think they do, because I feel like had Alu left, I feel like Wormley would have been the incumbent nose. So I don't think they care about it anymore. I think they care about having, because they've taken more pass rusher profiles at this point at the nose position. Like Hargrave is an explosive, springy guy, and Alu has developed into a guy that's very handsy and has great hand usage, and has that, and even at 33 has a little bit of a pep in his step off the line, and Wormley has great length and certainly has pass rushing chops coming from that. So they've taken a bit of a different role in that nose position. They don't need, a Casey Hampton. I know people have talked about them adding a Casey Hampton. I don't think you'll ever see a Casey Hampton again on the Steelers. They don't need a huge, big, burly guy to just eat up space, because they're going for guys that are disruptive now. And I think that's worked well for them. Because we've even seen Hayward and Tuitt sometimes slide in the nose spot. Not a ton, but we've seen it at times.
And if you have 3 guys that are generally the same size, it doesn't matter which of them takes the double team on any given play. So we've seen Cam Hayward 2-gap at end. It doesn't matter, you can, as long as one guy's taking up 2 blockers, it doesn't matter which one of those 3 guys it is. And so, that's I agree with you that I don't think that's a huge need. But now the guys that, if you look at a draft board, you see guys that say D tackle, that also means ends for the Steelers too. I mean, the guys that are over 300 pounds are not going to be 4-3 ends, but they're going to be 3-4 ends, and really even probably over 280 you would project to be an end for the Steelers. Now that's obviously not a pressing need with Tuitt and Hayward now, but Hayward's getting up there, and I'm not sure how impressed the Steelers are by their depth at end. Isaiah Buggs has not gotten a ton of playing time, and seemed like he ceded minutes to Henry Mondu last year, to Carlos Davis, and so it's not like that group can't be upgraded on. Do you see that as a potential third-day fit for the Steelers here?
It's possible. Although they have signed a variety of guys at that spot just to be like camp bodies, or at least prospective guys that they look at. I think Davis is very interesting, because he kind of came out of Nebraska in that 7th round as a prospect, but he tested really well. So I think unlike other positions like we talked about with guard, with tackle, on the offensive side of the ball, they don't really need a developmental guy, because I think they have that in Carlos Davis. I think he's the guy that could grow potentially to be a successor at one of these spots, potentially Alu's successor down the road. Now they could upgrade the pure depth. They could use a 5th guy there, I think. Whether that's going to be Davis, Buggs, Mondu, Calvin Taylor, I think, is still on the roster as well. They've signed a few guys. Whether that's going to be him, I think Wormley clearly has the inside track to the 4 rotational spot to be the main guy. But I mean, you kind of look at their depth, and just looking at what they do in that 4-3 again, which they play a lot more. They play a 4-3 look where they will, slide Hayward or Tuitt out to base 4-3 end, because they do have that versatility. They'll put Watt his hand in the ground, and then they'll play like Alu and Tuitt or Hayward on the interior. So Alu is also part of that rotation depth. And I think that would be nice for them if they can get Carlos Davis up up and ready to play nose, so they can, maybe rotate Hayward and two it out for Alualo and slide Alualo to the 5 a little more, or vice versa, whatever they see. But yeah, it can be upgraded upon. But again, they have guys that are there that have some upside to them, and I think have actually played well. I thought Carlos Davis did play well down the stretch. Bugs didn't do anything for me, but I thought Mondu has some. He has some things where you look and you say, well, he could be a little bit something. Rough starting out, but I think they have some upside there. The only way I see them upgrading upon it is if they find like a jet.
Well, let's talk about some of these potential gems. A guy I'm really interested in is Marvin Wilson. He was a guy that was probably on track to be a much higher pick than he's going to end up being, and did not have a great senior year. Came back actually and didn't have a great senior year, but his body, it's like 6'5", 305. That's sort of exactly what the Steelers are looking for. What do you make of him?
I don't know what to make of him because listen, this is a guy that was a top 10 projected pick this past summer. And then he because his 2019 tape was really good. He was very explosive. He could take on blocks. He could 2-gap. He could 1-gap. He's got a really good club rip, a good cross chop too. He's got this variety of moves, and he plays pretty low at this pad level. And then you saw his 2020 tape. I kid you not, it was undraftable, straight up. And then it came to light that he was dealing with knee injuries, and we've known he's dealt with knee injuries in the past. And then he re-injured his knee at the Senior Bowl.
And I thought he looked good at the Senior Bowl before he re-injured his knee. Interestingly, I thought he was one of the better D tackles there.
Yeah, and I think he's a guy that the knees are going to be issues because now you wonder if that's a long-term thing, but can he gain some of that juice back with the pass rush ability he has, with the versatility he gives you on the line, because he is such an effective guy, especially on stunts when he's a looper. I think he's very good at using that explosiveness and turning it into power and really collapsing pockets from the interior. I think he's very good at that. The issue again is he has such obvious bust potential, but he could be great. If he really works on his balance. I think the balance is the biggest thing with him, but he's a guy that you could probably take. I don't even know where his stock is at this point with those knee injuries, maybe round 4 or 5, somewhere around there. Maybe he falls further. I would take him in the 6th if he's there at the Steelers pick for sure. I think that's a good value for him, but he's got obvious bust potential and obvious upside. So one of the more interesting guys to come out of this class. I will say that.
All right, 2 guys that opted out that I think are pretty interesting for the Steelers. First one was Tyler Shelvin from LSU, another guy that was probably a projected first-round pick before he decided to opt out. Weighed in enormous, 350, 345, somewhere in that range. So clearly a nose for the Steelers, and we said that's not a big need, but how good of a fit would he be?
Well, this would be your classic Casey Hampton. This is what Tyler Shelvin is. He's a huge guy that has no pass rush ability, but every bit of an elite run stopper, which is a complete throwback. But for what he is, he's very good at it. And I think people might have been projecting maybe an improvement in that pass rush ability. He said he's been working on it a little bit this offseason, but he's not really got great explosiveness. He's more of this stout guy that can 2-gap from that 0 tech, the 1 tech spot and just not move. So very much a throwback. But again, we talked about this. The Steelers have been moving away from that type of nose as of recent. That doesn't mean Shelvin might not be on the radar, but he's probably going to be around 4 pick. And I'm not sure if I could see them taking a true nose like that that early. So I think Shelvin makes sense if they want a true run-stopping stout nose. But again, they've moved away from that.
Yeah, I think he would have to fall a little bit farther than where he's generally predicted. I think I saw his average mock draft position is just below 100. I think it'd have to go into the 5th round before the Steelers, and they don't have a 5th round pick. So before they would consider taking him, but they do have those 6 and 2 7s, and maybe a guy that I could see back there very surprisingly is Jalen Twyman, Pitt defensive tackle who was being mocked as a 1st round pick before he opted out, and then weighed in at 319 and did not run particularly well, although he did put up 40 bench press reps at Pitt's Pro Day. I think if he's 319 and he's that strong, he's a Steelers kind of D-tackle candidate, right? But where's he going to get drafted, and is that a potential fit?
Twyman's interesting because he's a guy that, when he opted out, I was personally surprised he opted out because, again, he felt like one of those guys that was a preseason first rounder, but didn't really cement that spot because he had productivity with pretty good power, never really was great off the line. I never thought he was super explosive, and his issue was with pad level. He's always been a guy that plays really high, and for a guy that doesn't have great explosiveness, and he's what, 6'1". I mean, it's not like he's tall. So he's this undersized DT that plays really high. So you would like your smaller guys like that to get under those pads, use their power, and take advantage of that natural disposition. But I do think that Twyman is a guy that is balanced. I think he's able to cross the face of a lot of blockers because he's pretty good with his hands. I really like his chop swim. I think that's a really good move that he has. And I do think he's a guy that I know people I've talked to that kind of are around Pitt football. They say he's in there every day. He's a gym rat, essentially, like that. So I think that's obviously a Steelers profile, right? Work hard. They don't have really a problem taking some undersized defensive tackles. I think Carlos Davis is like 6'2". He's not very big. So it's not crazy that they would take someone like a Jalen Twyman. I think he has that versatility that we talked about to move up and down the line, play 3, play 5. I'm not sure if he'll play a base end role, but I think he could definitely slide in at the nose in a pinch too. Again, he's 6'1", so that's perfect size for a nose. You don't need to be tall to be a nose tackle. It's actually better if you're small. So I think he definitely is a type of guy where if he falls, and I think the general consensus is now he's like around 4 through 7, like a day 3 guy comfortably. I think Twyman could be a nice value there. And the Steelers have seen him up and close, obviously. So they know it. They know better than probably most teams.
Who else is a day 3 candidate there that stands out to you as a potential good fit for the Steelers? I like Quinton Bohanna just because he's enormous, and I think that's fun. But and they seem to love Kentucky linemen as of recently too. They had Bud Dupree, obviously, as a Calvin Taylor, and they just signed another one, I believe, this offseason as well.
Yeah, Kentucky linemen, kind of their thing. As of recent, there's no doubt about it that they love themselves.
How is Kentucky not better with Bohanna, Taylor on the same? I mean, you got a couple NFL linemen. You would think you'd have a better defense than that.
Plus, like Kelvin Taylor and like, because Taylor's going to go day 2, or Kelvin Joseph. My bad, I mixed up.
Right. Yeah.
Kelvin Joseph, and I think they have some other guys. Jamin Davis is there obviously as well with his freaky athleticism. And yeah, I don't know how they haven't been better. It's kind of weird. Maybe the offense is just that bad. I haven't heard of many Kentucky offensive players outside of the line. I think Lynn Bowden has been the big one, but other than that, they really haven't had a ton of. And Bowden, I mean, when Bowden was there, they actually did have a nice little run where people were talking about Kentucky football, but I don't think they've really ever had a good quarterback outside of the Bowden option offense last year. So, Bohanna is interesting. I think he's a very specific type of guy where you're going to get like not much pass rush value, but you can get a guy that's a space eater who's not going to move much. And he can 2-gap from the nose spot. So again, I think he's a perfect late round nose if they want that, which they very well might. Again, they like those guys, or as a PFA, I think he's definitely a good option for them. Some other guys I really do like though, and this is a guy that has some pass rush upside. I like Jonathan Marshall out of Arkansas. I think he's a really good option for them. Excellent athlete, very, very explosive, phenomenal body control. I think he's super strong. You watch his Mississippi State tape from this year. It's silly. I mean, he took over that game for Arkansas. I think he's going to be very, very good. And I do think that he's a guy that sometimes struggles a little bit with kind of holding that spot. So I think he's more actually of the 5 tech than the nose. So we're talking 5'3" tech here with him, but he's got so much pass rush upside. He's a guy that I think by year 2, year 3, you could maybe have a gym in. He's one of my favorite guys. And this Darius Stills out of West Virginia, he's another guy.
I was going to bring him up too. I love him I just love his motor.
Yeah, he plays super hot, and unlike Twyman, he's a guy that plays really low, and I really like that. When you look at what he brings, he's a guy that is undersized. He's very well built, though. He's pretty stout, but he with that motor, he plays also over aggressive at times, so he does need to dial it back. But I love that he plays hard. It's better to, it's easier to get guys to turn it down a little bit than turn it up. So that Stills has that, and he has that great get off, and he has great energy that teams will love, and he can play up and down the line. I think he can play anywhere from base 4-3 to nose. I legitimately think he has that ability.
He played all of it at West Virginia. I mean, he played nose tackle. They run that. It's like a 3-3-5 defense, but he played nose tackle. He played 3-tech. He played 5-tech, and he's small, but he's not quick, and I think that's hurting his draft stock. But I think before what the Steelers asked their defensive linemen to do, that's not a deal breaker.
No, it's not. They don't ask a lot of short area quickness. They just ask you to explode through, use your explosiveness, and I think that's exactly what Stills could do. I like Stills' fit in Pittsburgh. There's even reps of him working from a wide 9, and obviously he'll never get that ability at the NFL. You're never going to put Darius Stills out on a wide 9, but he's done it. So I have no issue saying he could be a 4-3 base end on from time to time if they need him to. So I like Darius Stills. Another guy I really like, Bobby Brown from Texas A&M, is a really solid football player. Has great frame, has great explosiveness, gets a lot of movement up front, played all up and down the line from 5, played a lot of 4-eye, which I think is interesting. This is something that we haven't talked about yet. The Steelers bear front with the double 4-eye. They play a little tight front. They do it against the Ravens a lot. They run this tight front that they stole from Iowa State, and they call it their bear front. And I think this is something that you have to really look at for the Steelers as something where you just take up a ton of space, but you can be a penetrator too. And I think Bobby Brown has experience playing that 4-eye spot. I think he's a good fit. Also, Darius Stills has experience playing that as well. So I always also like that fit. That tight
Brown
front.
Also a junior, which the Steelers always like.
Yep. Big time. So he's a guy that I really like. Another guy that I'll throw out, a guy that's probably gonna turn heads a little bit, that has kind of fallen down boards, is to Daryl Slayton out of Florida. Kind of more true nose, big 330 pounder. So he's another guy that could 2-gap and do that nose. There are names here that can be a rotational. Kairos Tonga out of BYU, I really like him too. Very stout, very well built. He doesn't have great length, but again, this is a guy that has the explosiveness and ability to really get after the quarterback too. So there's a few names here. We didn't mention a ton of guys that are up a little further. Oso Digizua, I also like. The Steelers met with him. But I
just can't see them using a 3rd round pick.
Yeah, I think he's going to go a little earlier than that. And they sent Carl Dunbar to Milton Williams this pro day, but I don't know what to make of that. He's not going to play edge. He's not going to stand up in a 3-4, obviously. So he'll probably go too early anyways, but that was a little interesting note. They sent him to Milton Williams' pro day. Milton Williams is 284. So you can see that'll be a guy that probably plays base end in 4-3 and 5-tech. So I don't know. Maybe they're looking at adding a 5-tech, which would make sense. Quite honestly, it would make some sense, but just not that early. Just not that early, please.
Yeah, I mean that's not. I mean, Cam Hayward was 294 coming out, so he's given up 10 pounds there. I'm not sure I see that, but I do like the player, and I think the Steelers are showing that they have a very specific type when it comes to the early rounds, where they're looking for these major conference guys. They want guys that played big time college football, but when it comes to the later rounds, they're not shy about going wherever to get guys and sending a staff member to Louisiana Tech for probably one guy. I don't know that the Bulldogs there had another draft prospect, but that's not something that totally surprises me from them anymore.
Nah, they've done it. Just look at last year, what they did. Dotson, Highsmith. They've drafted guys from the small schools recently, and they'll go all the way. maybe they do it this year, even early, with their interest in guys like Spencer Brown and Quinn Miners. But if you want a real small school guy, Kenny Randall out of Charleston is another guy. Real athlete, man. I mean, this dude, he moves. Just the reason he was so good at Charleston was because he just was a better athlete than everybody on the field. It wasn't even close. Guy that is a really solid football player, used to be at Temple, got dismissed due to character concerns, but they kind of cleaned it up. So he's a really aggressive athlete that could make some real noise and make this roster if he gets picked. So I think that's a nice high upside option if they want to go there.
This is why you're the expert, Nick, because the University of Charleston, is that D3?
Yeah, I think it's D.
I mean,
it's D2. Maybe it's D2. I think.
Okay, well, are they in the Mountain East? That's the West Virginia D2 conference. I didn't know Charleston was in the Mountain East. They're yeah. I mean, that's scraping the bottom of the barrel there, and that's why we love your knowledge, because I don't think too many other draft experts have pulled that one. I actually knew about Randall because through our West Virginia site, Tom Bragg covers West Virginia high schools for us and is down in the Charleston area. And so I didn't know about him, but man, that's a significant pull right there.
Yeah. Kenny Randall, man. I mean, he's a guy that's turned heads. I think he at WVU Pro Day, I think, and he tested. He actually did really well. So he's getting some buzz, though. So, I heard a little bit about it and I checked him out. Hey, he's got some juice, man. He's got some juice. I'm up for it.
Charleston went 3-0 this spring, so I don't know what that means, but there you go. Well, that's good stuff. I mean, I think, to summarize, I don't think defensive line is a big need for the Steelers. In fact, it might be their dead last need, but I do think there is a good chance they take one on the third day of the draft because they can upgrade their depth and their rotation. And, let's be honest, those guys, Alulu, Hayward, to it, they're not exactly young anymore. And so you have to start thinking about the possibility of injuries and the future. And defensive linemen do take some time to develop. So it's not, if you're going to take a third day guy, it's going to take him a couple of years to become a starter if that's the route the Steelers are going to take. And given their other needs, other places, I think we're pretty sure they're not going to go that direction early in the draft. I think we've hit almost everywhere. We've talked about edge rushers. We've talked about inside linebackers and safeties. We've talked about corners. And, of course, we've talked about running backs and centers and tackles, which are what it seems to be everybody wants to hear. But so on this last week of the draft, I think we're going to talk about some trends and some other things as we get right up to the 2021 NFL draft next Thursday. If you've got a topic you want to hear Nick and I talk about, anything related to the draft, a specific position, a player, and maybe some guys from some of the local schools we'll get into as well. If you're more of a college football fan, we can do that. So get us a comment and make sure to subscribe to the channel and hit that bell for notifications when you get our show, when you get mic'd up in the mornings, when you get our Pittsburgh post game, which I'll be on this afternoon. I got the Pirates and the Tigers starting in just a few minutes. So I'm going to get to that, and we'll be back tomorrow for another episode of Draft Talk. For Nick Farabaugh, I've been Alan Saunders. Thanks for watching, and have a great day.